few weeks ago, I was sitting at a gate at the airport, kind of minding my own business, waiting on my connecting flight to arrive that I might be on my way. But I found myself watching the passengers from that connecting flight as they deplaned, coming down the jetway. One of the passengers was a serviceman of some sort. He was in the military. I know about this much about the military, so I have no idea what branch of service. I can only tell you that he was in those desert camouflage fatigues that have become entirely too familiar in the world that we live in right now. I think he caught my attention because he dropped these two big rucksacks to the floor, and I heard the noise as they hit the floor. And he took 4 or 5 steps, not a full sort of run, but 4 or 5 quick steps to a waiting woman. And she leapt off the ground into his arms. He wrapped his arms around her, and they engaged in what must have been a 5-minute long embrace. And they didn't say a word to one another. They didn't say word one. They barely looked each other in the eyes. They basically just grabbed a hold of one another and stayed locked in that embrace, I kid you not, for 5 minutes. It was a pretty powerful moment. I'm looking at this serviceman and I start thinking about where he's been, what he's doing. The time that he must have spent away from his wife. I noticed they were both wearing rings. I noticed those sorts of things. The fine details. And then I started watching the people that were around us at the gate as this was transpiring. A number of people walked by and had a quick look and kept going. Some didn't seem to notice what was happening at all. Another was talking on his cell phone and was recounting the scene to the person on the other end. And that made me feel a lot better because it made me feel like I wasn't the only one witnessing this powerful moment, that someone thought that it was significant enough that they needed to share it. Stop in the middle of a terminal and share what they were witnessing. It was powerful. Love was palpable. And the attentive, those paying attention, shared in that moment. It seems to me that the Pentecost story, as read in the Acts of the Apostles, passed in a similar kind of way. Some clearly knew that they were in the midst of something extraordinary. They saw the signs, they heard the voices, they felt the rush of wind, and they knew that something extraordinary was underway. It seems that others passed by, missed it, didn't engage at all. Some wrote the moment off cynically, saw it as senseless or meaningless. But the ones that really got the point, the ones that shared that moment, understood its power, the gift of a common language, the gift of common understanding. The attentive shared that moment. But let's think about how we got there for a minute. The fledgling Christian community was in the midst of great uncertainty. In effect, they were living in the midst of Holy Saturday once again. Jesus is gone via the ascension, and they're waiting. They have no idea what's next. They've seen the treatment that Jesus received, and they don't know what the future holds. But the Spirit was what was next. Think about how the Spirit unfolds in the midst of this thing. It's not a private matter. The Holy Spirit doesn't come to the disciples as they're hiding out, as they're wrestling around with what's next. The Holy Spirit descends upon an international crowd in the midst of Jerusalem in a public way. As the uncertain, fledgling Christian community dithers, wondering what's next, what they're to do next, and waits, the Holy Spirit comes and moves out ahead of them, lives beyond their community and their confines, working where there is no church, taking the message of God's reconciling love out there, as Acts says, to be shared with all flesh. The Spirit takes the reconciling love of God quite literally to the world in a way that the world can understand. The message, the good news of this feast of Pentecost is that God is always ahead of us when we dither, when we rive in uncertainty, when we don't act because we're afraid, uncertain, or don't desire to act. The Spirit is always out there ahead of us, working out the redemption of the world with us or without us. Some might not apprehend it. Some might remain cynical. Be attentive. Those with eyes to see and ears to hear just might see the Spirit out there, working in grace and mercy and compassion, just like an embrace, where words are absolutely unnecessary.